Can you truly be religious and a scientist at the same time? For some, that question sounds almost absurd. After all, science is about logic, observation, and evidence. Religion, well, that's about faith, mystery, and the unseen. Aren't they fundamentally opposed? And yet, there are brilliant minds, people who decode the fabric of the universe, who also kneel in prayer. So who's right? Is religion a relic of the past for someone who embraces science? Or is it possible to believe in both reason and revelation? Let's dive in. Let's start by understanding why this question exists in the first place. At the heart of the tension between religion and science are two different ways of approaching truth. Science depends on the scientific method: hypothesis, experimentation, observation, replication. It demands evidence. If a claim can't be tested or falsified, science says, we can't accept it as true. Religion, on the other hand, is built on faith trust in something that cannot be fully proven. It often involves sacred texts, divine revelation, and personal spiritual experience. The stories and claims within religion are typically not falsifiable. You can't test the resurrection of Jesus in a lab or measure the presence of God with a microscope. This leads to one of the most obvious contradictions. Science encourages doubt. Religion often encourages belief without doubt. A scientist is expected to constantly question, challenge, and revise. A religious person is often asked to trust, to believe even when they don't fully understand. So from the outside, these appear to be in direct conflict. But are they really? Historically, science and religion weren't always enemies. In fact, many of the early pioneers of science were deeply religious. Take Isaac Newton. One of the greatest minds in history, he discovered the laws of motion and gravity. He also wrote extensively on theology and biblical prophecy. Or Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics. He was a monk. Or Georges Lemaitre, the man who proposed what we now call the Big Bang Theory. He was a Catholic priest. These men didn't see science and religion as opposites. To them, studying the universe was a way of understanding God's creation. So when did the conflict start? Some say the Enlightenment brought a growing belief that human reason could replace religion. Others point to specific clashes, like Galileo's condemnation by the church. In more recent decades, debates around evolution, abortion, and the origins of the universe have widened the gap, especially in public discourse. Today, it often feels like you have to choose a side, but that's a false choice. Even today, many respected scientists are religious. Francis Collins, for example, the man who led the Human Genome Project. He's a geneticist who mapped the entire human DNA sequence and also a committed Christian. He even wrote a book called The Language of God, where he describes science as a means to explore God's creation. Or Jennifer Wiseman, an astrophysicist who studies star formation and speaks openly about her Christian beliefs. Or Abdus Salam, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist who was a devout Muslim. These scientists don't see faith and science as mutually exclusive. They see them as different lenses, different ways of approaching different kinds of questions. And that brings us to an important idea. What if science and religion are answering different questions? Science asks, how did the universe begin? What causes disease? How does evolution work? Religion asks, why is there something rather than nothing? What is the meaning of suffering? What should I live for? You can use a microscope to study a flower. You can learn everything about its biology, its evolution, its genetic code. But science won't tell you why that flower moves you, why it reminds you of someone you loved, or why it makes you feel alive. That's where faith often steps in. And maybe, just maybe, both are needed to make life whole. Still, we can't ignore that some beliefs in religion do directly contradict scientific evidence. Take creationism, for example, the literal belief that the earth was created 6,000 years ago in 6 24-hour days. That clearly conflicts with everything we know from geology, astronomy, and biology. Or the idea that prayer can physically alter the universe in ways that defy known physics, without leaving measurable traces. So yes, in some forms, religious belief does stand in contradiction to science. But most religious scientists don't read their scriptures literally. They see them as symbolic, metaphorical, or historically contextual. They don't pray for magic tricks. They pray for wisdom, strength, peace. Not to override physics, but to find purpose within it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Science is powerful, but it has limits. Science can explain what the universe is made of, but it can't tell you why it exists. It can describe the chemical processes behind love, but it can't tell you whether you should sacrifice yourself for someone else. It can show you what happens when someone dies, but it can't answer what happens after death, if anything at all. Those are not scientific questions. They're philosophical. They're spiritual. And for many people, that's where religion continues to speak. Faith begins where data ends. So can you be truly religious as a scientist? It depends on how you define both. If being religious means rejecting all scientific evidence, then no, that's incompatible. But if being religious means searching for meaning, holding a belief in something greater, and embracing both wonder and mystery, then yes, it's not only possible, it may be deeply human. A scientist doesn't stop being human when they put on a lab coat. They still grieve. They still love. They still wonder what it all means. And maybe, just maybe, those are the moments where faith becomes real. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not saying all scientists should be religious, or that all religious people should embrace science. But I do believe this. We need both clarity and mystery. We need knowledge and we need meaning. We need science to understand the world, and something deeper to understand ourselves. So can a scientist truly be religious? Not only is it possible, it may be the most honest way to live in a world that is both explainable and beautifully beyond explanation. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Can belief and reason coexist? Let me know in the comments. And if this made you think, subscribe for more.